fact, the more we learn about our solar system and the universe, the more unique our Earth becomes. As home to over 1 million different species of life, each with its own special criteria for survival, the Earth repeatedly reinforces the fact that God orchestrated each detail necessary for terrestrial existence. Does that sound like blind, mindless, chance, random? No, that shows intelligent design and purpose, creative purpose. Now, I wrote this over 20 years ago, and things have changed. It says over 1 million different species of life. And back then, that's what the textbooks were saying. However, in 2003, the World Conservation Union said, well, we've got about 1.5 to 1.8 million named species already. We've named 1.5 to 1.8 million species of life on planet Earth. But, they said it during 2003, we suspect there are between 5 to 10 million total species. 5 to 10 million. 8 years later, they kind of narrowed that range to 6.5 to 10 million. And then 2 years after that, in 2013, they kind of dialed it back a little bit and said now we probably have about 2 to 8 million. So that's kind of where we are right now in 2021. Somewhere between 2 to 8 million species. But that's still a lot more than just 1 million species, right? And a species is a specific type of creature, right? That's where the word species comes from, because it's specific. This picture here, this figure 2, it's not labeled too much. The animals are labeled, but the different zones of the ocean are not. So I kind of wanted to go over that a little bit, because there is ocean life in every single level there. And that's what Genesis 1 said. God says, basically, and to let the waters be filled, and let the creatures multiply. And that's exactly what they've done. From sea level down to 200 meters, this is called the epipelagic zone. Epi means above, and pelagic means open ocean. So this is the open ocean zone that's above. Sometimes it's called the sunlight zone. Okay, so it goes from sea level down to 600 feet, which is about 200 meters. And then below that, we have the mesopelagic. Meso means middle. The mesopelagic zone. The sunlight is actually dimming now as we go lower. And so this is called the twilight zone. Do, 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 do. Some of you remember the show, right? With Rod Serling, I believe is his name. Yeah, I was a little boy and that show terrorized me. Sometimes. My dad liked the intrigue and the mystery and all that, so we had to watch it. So, but the twilight zone is a real thing. Okay? It goes down to 1,000 meters, 200 meters to 1,000 meters. That's about 3,300 feet below sea level. As we continue to go lower, we go into the bathypelagic zone from 1,000 meters to 4,000 meters. That's 13,000 feet. And this is called the midnight zone. So we have the sunlight zone, the twilight zone, and the midnight zone. Creatures all through there. And then we go from 13,000 feet depth down to 20,000 feet. Okay? From 4,000 meters to 6,000 meters. And this is called the abyssopelagic zone. Abysso is referring to the abyssal plains, better known as the sea floor. So this takes us all the way down to the floor of the ocean, which is the abyss. Okay? And then we go even lower. We have a fifth zone. Well, what's lower than the floor? The basement, right? The basement is lower than the floor. And to oceanographers, the basement of the ocean basin are the trenches, the deep sea trenches. And this is no shallow thing. This is 20,000 feet down to the deepest point of the ocean that we know of, which is called the Challenger Deep, 36,000 feet down, 6.8 miles below sea level. This is off the coast of Guam in the Pacific Ocean, where this is located. And this is called the Hadal Pelagic Zone. Hadal from that prefix referring to the word Hades, because we're at the deepest level now. Okay, we're at the basement of the ocean basins. Okay, so there are 5 zones that oceanographers divide the ocean into, and there is life found at every single one of those. Okay, and then we have the next verse coming up. It says, "For thus saith the Lord, who created the heavens, God himself, who formed the earth and made it. He hath established it. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord and there is none else. Isaiah 45:18. Wow, this verse is packed. First, let's look at the verbs. Okay, you'll need 4 fingers to do this. Created, formed, made, established. Created, the Hebrew word bara. Scripture says that only God is the subject of this verb. We, as humans, technically cannot create the way God does. God creates by speaking something into existence that had no previous existence. He speaks it out of nothing. His thought becomes reality through his word. His command, his verbal decree, okay, by fiat. God creates, bara. Okay? And then it says he formed the earth. This is more of a hands-on word. This is not just mouth now. Now we're talking fingers, okay, in the anthropomorphic sense there. Some scriptural verses actually say that the heavens and the moon are the work of thy fingers, of thy right hand, those kind of things, that kind of thought, imagery. We're talking like a potter or a sculptor now. The word yatsar in the Hebrew, formed. Man's body, remember, was formed from the dust of the earth. God took special attention in making Adam's body, okay, Adam's body. And then it says God made there, who formed the earth and made it. The Hebrew word asa. These are not synonyms. Okay? Create and make are not synonyms. To make is to take something which is already in existence and to refashion it somehow. Either by molding it or stretching it or doing something to it. But he's not starting from nothing when he's making. He only starts from nothing when he's creating there. And then we have the word established, which is the word kun. K-U-W-N is the transliteration there. And basically it means to set in place. Okay? And earth is meant to be permanent. The heavens are also meant to be permanent. But then you think, well, didn't I remember reading how the heavens and the earth were going to be destroyed? Yes, burned up. How all the elements will melt with fervent heat. 2 Peter chapter 3, Revelation 20. Isaiah 65 and 66 talks about a new heaven and a new earth. Yes, you did. You did read that. But we're not making it, this new earth and new heavens is going to be renewed. Sin is going to be purged out of the old creation to form the new creation there. God's not going to start from scratch. The word dissolved in the Greek text, synestasa, means to unloosen. So basically, nuclear bonds, which hold matter together, are going to be unloosened, and that energy is going to be released. And then the molecules, atoms, will be put back together. Maybe in the same form, maybe not. Okay, so don't know there. But the verbs are very interesting. He also uses the phrase, he created it not in vain. Why is that an important phrase? Because in Genesis chapter 1, in verse 2, second verse of the Bible, it says that the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. That phrase, without form and void, is the Hebrew tahu wabahu. And some people have translated it to mean in chaos or confusion. God does nothing in chaos or in confusion. God is not the author of confusion, 1 Corinthians tells us. God allows things to be done decently and in order. Same chapter tells us that too. The reason it's without form and void is because it's not finished. We've just started. God spoke the raw materials into existence, and then God's going to do some making and forming and establishing. Some framing, right? Those are the verbs we've already seen. Just like we start off as one cell, egg and sperm, fertilized zygote, we're human at that point. Okay? I know that's controversial in our society, but we're human at that point. But we're not finished yet, right? 9 months of development, and then we're born, right? Voila. But we're human the whole way through. Okay? We're not subhuman before we're born, right? We're completely human. And didn't God say in verse 1, the heavens and the earth, God created the heaven and the earth and called it earth, even in verse 1, when he doesn't use the capital E earth until verse 10. When he makes that solid rock out of the water, and he called the dry land earth. That's when we get the capital E. But all before that, it was still earth, right? So that's kind of interesting. He created it not in vain. there. Some people use this phrase to say, well, if God did not create it, Tahu, and it was Tahu Wabahu, there in Genesis chapter 1, then obviously something must have happened to make it chaotic. And they try to put evolutionary time, millions and billions of years, between verse 1 and verse 2, and what's called the gap theory. They actually make a gap between verse 1 and verse 2 to slide their evolutionary time scale in there, but that's not going to work. The Hebrew grammar will not allow that. Every verse in Genesis chapter 1 is the word, every verse starts with the word and, except for verse 1. It starts with in the beginning. And then there's and. Look at it. Every verse starts with and, which is the Hebrew word vav, W-A-W. This is called the vav consecutive. It's a grammatical construction which links the verses together where you cannot pull them apart there. We're talking about a literal week of time of 7 literal solar days, each of one Earth rotation, an evening and a morning. An evening, a morning. An evening, a morning. It gets to be kind of repetitious. But God has to do that, right? Because we want to keep changing His Word, or adding to it, or subtracting from it. God doesn't want that, and God has built the chapter so that we logistically and consistently cannot do that to it. There. We cannot separate verse 1 from verse 2.